We're here to unfold the leaves of history and plant the seeds of truth about the hemp plant. And are we ready to go to Terence? Hello, Terence?
Hi, I'm standing by. How are you?
Just great. You're on the big island of Hawaii, right?
Yeah, I am, in fact, yes. Can you hear me? I'm also coming cellular.
Yeah, we can hear you just great. It's so great to hear your voice here on KPFK again. I hope
it's been a while.
Yeah. One thing that people who've been listening to my tapes for a long time now, the Seeds tape I put out, which is a tape of information all about hemp, you were one of the original people on it talking about the archaic history of the hemp plant. And for those of people out here that haven't heard you before, why don't you give a little brief history of what you know about this plant?
Well, this is probably one of the, as I'm sure you know, one of the world's oldest cultivated plants in the Middle East. The original wild type seems to come from Central Asia somewhere, and probably long before people brewed beer or made any more kind of complicated intoxicants, they were throwing hemp branches onto fires and inhaling the fumes. In my book, I wrote about how the words associated with storytelling, like unraveling a tale and weaving a yarn and following a thread, are all weaving words and also then hemp words. So somehow consciousness and weaving and hemp, because it's such an excellent fiber plant, all rose up together in the course of the last 15, 20, 25,000 years. There's no older known weaving than that, although there are patterns on walls that suggest weaving.
Yeah, in fact, I believe in Chitalhoyuk they've found hemp linen fibers in the graves that are like 8,000 to 9,000 years old.
I think you're right. It was impressions, wasn't it, of woven surfaces.
Right.
Yeah, so, and when you think about what a complicated intellectual task weaving is and how early people did it, you realize that their intellectual skills and their power of imagination were as equal to our own. And, you know, I've argued that plant use in the phase where hominids turned into human beings, psychoactive plant use, probably had a real input into the emergence of consciousness, especially the speed of the emergence of it. And of all the widely used intoxicants in the world today, hemp comes closest, I think, to capturing that archaic, sort of boundaryless, tribal modality that we lost when we moved into history.
You know, I recently had Lynn and Judy Osborne on with their new book, Green Gold, The Tree of Life, Marijuana and Magic and Religion. And the thing that really astonished me was that in all the temples of all the religions, they've always burned incense. And originally that incense was hashish. And what does that say about religion? All of these people who are having visions and talking to God were all inhaling the fumes of hashish.
Well, I think, you know, very early, before the rise of mechanical science, technology existed, different kinds of technologies, and what survives in the archaeological record are just simply the most durable items, the chipped stone and the fire pits. But I think you're right, incense use, oils, plant combinations, a whole vast technology of human interfacing with the natural world was probably the first database that human beings built up.
Yeah, and one of the things you've talked about too is how the use of this plant opens the doors of communication amongst people.
Right. Well, language. I'm working on a new book now where we, with a co-author, Philippe de Beaujolais, and we're really trying to tighten this psychedelic case for the impact of psychoactive psychoactive plants on language, and the more you study it, my conclusion is language came very, very recently, almost unbelievably recently, in the last 100,000 years. It isn't really a reorganization of the physical animal. It's more a behavior of some sort that must have broken out somewhere and then spread rapidly through the neighboring population. And one of the things that we're very interested in is the fact that inventions are rather like genes, in that once an individual has a breakthrough, it can be taught and replicate itself through a population. And certainly whoever the first human being was who discovered the intoxicating properties of cannabis, I think that meme must have spread very rapidly through the human population because the positive feedback from it was obvious.
Sounds like another 100th monkey story.
Well, I hope we can put it on even firmer ground.
Well, I find that when I'm sitting with a group of people and we may be inhaling the fumes of this plant, that you get very open and you communicate with people and you start understanding more, where as if you sat down and drank a six-pack of beer, you'd probably end up arguing with each other.
It's a boundary dissolving, it's a psychedelic or a near psychedelic, the way most people use it in the 20th century by smoking it. In the 19th century, people ate it and ate concentrated liqueurs made out of it. And the descriptions of those experiences, 100 years before LSD, make it clear that they were as swept away as a human being can be and could, report it later. Very impressive psychedelic states of mind described by people like Bayard Taylor and Fitzhugh Ludlow, and I'm sure you know all these folks.
And Lynn and Judy mentioned that a lot of the ancient holy anointing oils were very psychoactive, and when they would use these oils on the body, there would be like take flight from the intoxicants in the oil.
Well, see, from a chemist's point of view, an aromatic oil, an aromatic molecule and a drug molecule share a lot of structural similarities. The aroma of the molecule, meaning the fact that it volatilizes into air that way, means it has an active electronic ring structure, and many, many of these psychoactive substances are like that as well. Datura, flowering arborescent daturas have a wonderful odor. I mean, literally almost an intoxicating odor. And DMT, sometimes when you walk the jungle trails of the Amazon, you'll get a hit of the aroma of DMT as strong as if you held a pinch of it in your hand, but you can't locate it. It's coming from, one of the hundreds of plants all around you.
I sent you a copy of the November High Times that I had the luck to be in. And
I saw it, yeah.
Yeah, there were some great quotes from Food of the Gods on the connection with the feminine in the hemp plant.
Well, yes. I mean, it's very clear to me. I don't know if I said it so clearly in Food of the Gods, but one way to categorize all of these psychoactive substances that makes the politics of it a little easier to understand is to catalog them along the lines of which ones promote consumerism and which ones do not. And I think the resistance, the furious resistance to cannabis, based on no scientific or medical case whatsoever, is because cannabis promotes satisfaction with one's environment and one's social accomplishments and so forth and so on, and hence the shopping reflex is somewhat interfered with, and that is a very, very unwelcome thing to the consumer-driven, dominator, capitalist machine we're all trapped inside of. So I've always maintained that the issue of the legalization or the availability acceptability of cannabis was a deep and possibly insoluble problem based on the probable social transformations that it will bring. Unnecessary transformation, let me say. I mean, I don't see how consumerism can continue to promote itself without becoming more and more socially irresponsible. But nevertheless, if you suggest this to people, that we might be satisfied with less, we might resort to chemical means of appreciating what we have, they're horrified. I don't relate to consumerism as a basic American value. I think it's a somewhat counter to American Puritanism and the whole North European thing, but it's been grafted on by the corporate world order through advertising and manipulation of opinion over the past 20, 30 years.
Yeah,
Cannabis is definitely a thorn in the side of that mindless consumerist agenda.
I recently had the opportunity to talk to a Native American activist, singer-songwriter John Trudell on a radio show, and he pointed out that he didn't think that it was just about money. It wasn't just about corporations that they keep the hemp plant illegal, but it's also about perception, about how it makes you think and look at things that they don't want us to have. We can't be good little robots in the New World Order if we have the perceptions that this plant gives to us.
No, I think it's a tremendous stimulant to the imagination. The safest and most creative of all the potential stimulants to the imagination. And I agree. I think part of what was so frightening about the 60s to the establishment was the general spread of diversity, which in and of itself is viewed as threatening by anybody seeking to control a population. So it was simply the celebration of various styles of thought, art, sexual expression, music, so ethnicity, and all of this just rattles them tremendously. So I don't think about the hemp thing probably as constantly or as deeply as you do. I love cannabis. I see it as indispensable to my own evolution and future evolution, but I just don't know where it's headed socially. It also troubles me greatly that its artificially inflated price essentially co-opts the loyalty of the producers, because so many people can't imagine living without producing cannabis at $400 an ounce.
Right.
And so that's a corrupting influence on the community.
That's right. They've recently, in the last couple of years, discovered that there's receptors in our brains for a number of these psychedelic plants, one of them being the hemp plant. And you gave a talk one time. It was the first time I got to hear you live up in Port Hueneme about opening the doors of creativity. And I find I'm an artist, and the use of this plant really helps a lot when I'm just creating, because I don't sit down and follow patterns. I just sit down and it comes to me and I make it, you know?
Right. You invoke the muse. Well, that's how people always invoke the muse. They, lit some incense in an enclosed space and breathed deeply.
The Scythians had little tents that they put their head into, so their heads were totally enclosed and just breathed and breathed.
Yeah, well, they seem to have been the first, according to Herodotus. They seem to like to combine it with their sweat. And
right.
You're right. Get in little close spaces and then throw it onto the hot rock, which I'm sure, if you had, pounds and pounds of it, would be very effective.
Well, they've found many cauldron-type things in the burial mounds in that area where the Scythians were that had burnt hemp seeds in it. They just threw the whole bud in these hot cauldrons and breathed.
Well, I have a feeling that the archaeological record is very shallow in comparison to the real situation, and that as they keep digging, they're just going to push it back and back and back. It wouldn't surprise me if people 12, 15,000 years ago had a reasonably close association with this as man domesticated himself, he domesticated hemp too, I think. It all came together, and there may have been, as I suggest, some kind of a causal connection there.
Well, you once said that the possibilities that this plant had been carried over the Bering Strait from Asia would tend to lead people to think that it was here long before the Spaniards came here with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions, but certainly one of the interesting things about hemp is that it's so adaptable to extreme conditions. I know some of the best hash comes from the district of Jumla in western Nepal, and that's all above 10,000 feet and has a very short growing season. So hemp is one of the few plants that could have, since that trip across Thuringia took generations, probably, that could have been passed along and adapted and regrown in many different places and come across. If they studied the genetics, the DNA of the Asian and New World strains closely enough, they could probably eventually figure out exactly when that break came. I mean, that would be a good piece of work.
Well, one of the things I think, too, that I've heard you talk about that not too many talk about, with all this history that we're unfolding now, so much of it that's been hidden for many years, this is something that we really have to be straight with our kids about. We really have to tell them the truth and be honest with them, not run and hide in the bathroom to puff a little when they're not around.
Oh, yeah, I think, it's obvious the family divided against itself is no family at all, and the family is cauldron enough for neuroses. Children are a good reality check. I mean, if you're doing drugs you can't or don't want to explain to your children, then maybe you shouldn't be doing those drugs. It's difficult, I know, when you're in places where the schools try to turn the children against the parents. But if you just look at the history of rights in this country, the black struggle, the gay struggle, they're just not giving rights out. And the substance-using community needs to define itself and then just take a position and say, look, this is part of what being human is. And as a civilization, we have to accommodate this. That's what civilization means. It means coming to terms with what is human.
Yeah, and it's about time to start bringing these truths out to everyone. There's so many of us across the country that know this information now. We really need to keep talking to people and explaining to them before all our rights are stripped away.
Well, it's, H.G. Wells said history is a race between catastrophe and education.
Yeah, well, You've been doing a lot to help educate the world, I'll tell you. I've spent so many hours listening to you on tape. It's just wonderful to have you on the air again here. Is there any events you have coming up over on the mainland?
Well, I'm doing less and less actual public stuff because I'm trying to build a website and write a book. I will be at Esalen in the middle of October, and if people want to come up there and lay in some hot water, why, they can call the Esalen office. But I'm trying to stay home more in Hawaii, and it's a full-time job just to keep track of the way in which this culture is transforming itself.
And you're working on a new book, too?
I'm working on a new book, and I'm working on a website on the World Wide Web, which is really a whole other topic, but very exciting.
Is there any way people can get a hold of you?
They can send me email at hce@well.com. That's pretty easy to remember. hce@well.com email, and I'll do what I can. If everybody writes, then I won't answer anybody. But it's nice talking to you, and we can do this again.
Oh, that would be wonderful. And maybe when you get over to the mainland, we could do a phone-in from there so you won't have to be on cellular.
That would be nice. Well, let's bear that in mind.
Okay, well, we'll keep in touch, and thank you so much for talking with us today, and I will mail you off a copy of this entire show.
Well, just keep doing what you're doing. It's great. If enough people pay attention, we'll get through this little business here at the end of the 20th century.
Yeah, and we're going to get ready to listen to a friend of yours, Christian Wretch, after we get back here.
All right. I'll be talking to you.
Okay, thanks, Terence.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.